We would like to thank StoryTell for sponsoring this show. StoryTell is an audiobook platform that lets you hear hundreds of thousands of stories on your mobile, PC, wherever you prefer. This week I'm going to recommend a modern classic. It's a story that many have seen but few have heard or read. Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. The story is loosely based on the War of the Roses succession fights in 15th century England. When you hear Roy Dotrice narrate the story, it really brings it alive. Go to storytell.com/IVM and you'll be able to get your first month for 99 rupees. That's 200 rupees off the regular $2.99 a month price. That's storytell.com/IVM. Go get it now.
This is Vineet Kanabar live on tape and you're listening to a Filter Coffee conversation with 3 storytellers and StorySellers about why, among other things, advertising is dead. Say hello to Karthik and Varun and brace yourselves for the all-male podcasting coup that is the unprecedented episode. This is our fun and lazy year-ender going out on all 3 shows as we close out the year. Hi Karthik.
Hello sir.
Hi Varun.
Hello. You have to make it clear who's a storyteller, who's a storyseller on this episode. Otherwise we can't move forward. Yeah.
No, we're all equal parts each things because I think all of us are story-sellers, some of us are storytellers. I think that's where we leave it, right?
Is there a difference anymore? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's also another space that it's gone into. But I don't discriminate anymore. I do like 2-person shows, 1-person shows. I'm like, everybody's everything now. But yeah, this episode is a year-ender that we put together to come and share our points of view on how the year has been for all of us. And I think that's a good place to start because like the name of the episode says, it has been an unprecedented year. And much to Varun's chagrin, I'm going to say we are in the new normal. How has the new normal been for you guys?
I'm going to let Karthik start off on that one. Well, I still think about those
I think to say that I hate the new normal itself is a very July-August thing now. Right? So I think we should just entirely move on beyond there. But it's been great, man. I think I, for one, tested positive in June, July, got it over with very, very early in life. So my antibody count is like humongous. So basically, if there is a COVID zombie attack, I should be in the forefront protecting the universe. Right?
Wait, I have a technical question. Aren't the antibodies supposed to only last for three months?
Why do you have to, do all over on my fairy tale? My antibodies are stronger. Yeah. I drank Complan for like many days.
Okay, fine.
And advertising is not dead.
I beg to differ, but we will get into that.
How about you, Varun? What was your COVID moment?
I've actually realized that I enjoy working from home a lot. It will take a lot for me to actually want to go back into an office after. I just genuinely have enjoyed it. I feel that initially it was like, okay, what's going on? Trying to figure out what's happening outside and all that stuff. And thankfully, everybody, family, everywhere else was safe and fine. So, but I feel that once we crossed that April and May of fear, and then work started kicking in a lot more, and then stuff started moving. I mean, I remember going to a supermarket in May, and it was like post-apocalyptic. Half the tube lights weren't on, something was flickering, everyone with masks, and it was like this really bizarre, straight out of one of those movies that we've all watched.
Wasn't it strange to see Indians in queues though?
So the weird part about the queues, right, is that I remember seeing someone from office in one of those queues, and they had those circles, and he was on the other side of very early on a circle, and we were having this very far off chat. I feel that while you're socially distanced, the audio didn't have to be distanced, but I don't think that lasted though. By the time it was July, August, I had to go for some registration work to a government office, and I could see people take their masks off and wiping off sweat and wearing it again, and half the people had it on their chin or somewhere else, and I was the only guy there with a face shield, right? Thank God I didn't wear the PPE suit. I was going to wear a PPE suit. I was like, but I wore a face shield, and it was just like. I feel that apathy had kicked in by then, work had kicked in, but it's been an interesting year. But I've enjoyed working from home also because it lets me do the podcast bit a lot easier, spend a lot of time with my daughter, which is phenomenal. Just kind of had that time to her. But yeah, so I'm taking a lot of positives out of this year. I know there have been tremendous negatives across the world, but I'm trying to come out of this as a glass.
I think it gave all of us a lot of time to, whether you were quarantined or not, a lot of time in our head to think about everything. right? And I know this comes from an extremely privileged place. Not everyone is that lucky. There are people who are living with family, in close spaces. There are people who are living with, parents living with special children and all of that. But that aside, and of course people who have lost near and dear ones. But that aside, I think this is the longest I've spent with myself, I feel. Vineet, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think I had like 3 distinct phases. The first one was where I was just really surprised at how easily some of us had adapted to it. While there was like crazy migrant crisis and people outside and the underprivileged really grappling with it. To be on the other side for the first few months, it was like, wow, man, we're like really well adapted now. I can do my office is my dining table. Life is good. And after that is when the disillusionment really set in, the second phase where, okay, wait, how long is this going to go on? And how long can you go on with yourself, man? I mean, I used to think before the pandemic that you can't bore me, but I came pretty close to being bored with things, right? Like there are only that many things you can do one after the other to keep yourself busy and punctuate that with just doing the dishes, right? So after a point, it started getting a little painful. But now I think there's more widespread acceptance. I think post Diwali has been phase 3 where everybody's like, haan, theek hai, ab dekha jayega. At least in India, everybody's like, now we'll figure it out. And I'm still scared and at home. But I think that acceptance stage has come in my life, and I'm like, cool. The one thing that I know I need to do is avoid crowd. While sanitizing and all of those things are now second nature. I mean, there have been times when I'm walking around in my living room on a phone call, like an office call, and I'm sanitizing my hands because that's how it's become. But sanitize and make sure you're avoiding crowds. Those have sort of become second nature, and I think that says a lot on its impact, right? But hopefully it goes away in about a year's time from now. What do you think? Do you think it goes away in a year's time?
I think some habits won't go away. I feel that some things will come back, but many habits won't go away.
No, man, see, I think, we are in this for the long haul, right? Like, for example, I was just reading this analysis that if you were to, give vaccines to 2 million people a day, then we can get through to the larger population of India in about a year and a half, right? Like that's how long we have to go. But I think, for me also, I feel I spent a lot of time on the road in the last couple of months, and especially in rural Uttar Pradesh, I spent a lot of time driving around Meerut and all of that. And there is no pandemic there. There is no lockdown there. Right? There are mandis with thousands, tens of thousands of people, and not even 1 in 100 is wearing a mask. Right? So somewhere, I also started to question whether this whole thing exists only in our discourse, right, on the internet, on popular culture, on news, etc.
That also, if you think about it, is that divide growing even further, right? I feel that COVID's really managed to, because we can all live in our bubbles now, like actually live in a bubble. I mean, someone was telling me the other day, the only places you could interact with people would be, let's say, if you go to a mall or if you go to a restaurant or go to a movie theater. A lot of those have been taken away. Some of them come back. Like I was super happy the day I could walk back into a restaurant. And I think that literally we were like so happy, and we were just like, we picked the place because we wanted to be sure that first meal back in a restaurant had to be a good meal, right? We didn't want that to be a bad one. And thankfully it was. So I think that divide's going to get even further amplified now, because I feel that we're also making different choices, right? When Karthik said we kind of had time with ourselves, I was making choices saying, is this where I want to live? Is this is this the kind of environment I want to have? And there's so many questions that we've had to ask ourselves and still are asking ourselves even now. And that's what this year's done. This year's, if you have the privilege to be able to ask that question, you are asking that question. And in many cases, you had to make some tough decisions and deal with a lot of stuff. If you didn't have
a very important point on the divide. I think, I spent some time in a hospital, when I was down, and unfortunately, tragically, I'll be really, really surprised if there are no business class sections in hospitals very soon, right? Not the thing we want to see, but I'll be surprised if it didn't happen.
Right.
But Vineet, what was your journey through all this?
From that dark moment to my journey, I think I still haven't had my restaurant moment yet. We still haven't gone out, but I went and got a movie a couple of weeks ago. Went to watch Tenet, and that was a strange experience. There were like 6 people in the movie theater, and you couldn't take your popcorn inside. So that was kind of consistent with the heartless theme of the movie as well. So that way, but that was a strange experience, and I think, like Varun also said earlier, the choices that we're making are changing, and that I think will continue to affect us more and more. I don't think more people are going out to watch theaters. Like, while people are out after Diwali, everybody's out, and it's really shocking how everybody is just out to go to the market. Right?
I like how finally multiplexes are living out what they actually are, which is an F&B company, which is where a majority of the revenues come from anyway.
Except, but one second, now with what Vineet said, which means it's truly F&B because you have to have the F&B before you go in to watch the movie. So you can't even combine that in the experience.
It's like buy a popcorn, get a film for free.
It's a bit like going to film class, that you can't bring your food inside anymore. That's the only difference between going to theater and film class. But it's strange.
Did you like the film?
Like I said, it's a little bit, it's a great film, like put together, and obviously a real plane crash in a film and all of that. Obviously the scale and spectacle is great, but it's a little heartless. I mean, when you watch it, you'll see that there's another character in the film, and that person may probably have been the heart of the story. But yeah, it's a nice watch, but not his best for sure.
So that's an interesting point, right? Because what I said about restaurant, I want to ask you, was the experience, like, were you happy with the experience of going back to theater? Because that's obviously going to drive a lot of things, right, in how things happen.
It feels like a tick mark more than anything else, right? It feels a little hollow, a little bit, right? I think you don't go to a restaurant just for the food, right? And you don't go to a movie theater just for the film, right? I think there was a conversation earlier where we were talking about this. You miss the crowd around you also realizing the same things and witnessing that beauty together, right? I think that felt a little bit missing. But again, it could just be the film.
Which is actually what I want to ask you guys. I want to ask you guys, are there experiences that you've now taken fully digital, which you want to go back to doing the old school analog way? Like, I know that, like, for me, the theater is no longer a thing which I'm very like, oh, I really have to go watch it in the theater. I'm kind of that's kind of largely, I would say 80% has gone away from my head. Like, I'm not picky about going to theater or even a restaurant. A restaurant still half enough. Like, I'm enjoying this whole cloud kitchen thing. It's become a larger part of how I'd want to kind of order food from specific spaces who have got it right, and I can go into a long this thing on that. But there are those things which I've kind of moved a lot more digital than analog. Have you guys had things like that?
I think the biggest thing that's happened in general about entertainment this year, specifically within the digital access thing, is everything is reduced to video, right? So whatever fits well in that sense has really worked. I think I really want concerts back, though, right? So while you have movies going to OTT and they're still okay because basically the same format. But I feel like concerts, you miss something, that fidelity there a little bit, right? I think the same thing would be with theater as well, right? You can make it flat and put it on video, but it feels like something's missing. So I think those things I would want back, and at least have the option to go to a concert sometime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I like Vineet said, the theater experience for me is important, because I think, especially from an Indian content perspective, horror or comedy, it's not something that it's just between the screen and you. It's also between the people around you, right? The people going, oh, or people going, ha, all of that adds to the experience of the film itself, and I'm not getting any of that from my family. Like, they're like patal lok going on, and they're like, pass me the coffee. Right? So that to me is still something I would go back for. But I think definitely agree that music did not work online at all. Right? I think we have to be honest about that. I think a lot of things really, really worked online. Comedy for me really worked, digitally. But music certainly did not, I think.
Have you guys seen the special, Veerdas' special? If you haven't, you should watch it. It's just beautiful. Like, it's a great example of how you can use the online medium to kind of make it something really, really, I mean, it was engaging and emotional in a very different way. Like, I've seen a few comedy shows that just kind of like took the cake for me.
It's amazing, right? He did what, like some 40 shows online during the lockdown?
And he asked all of them the same question. What are you going to do after lockdown opens up? And it was on the fly. It was improvised basis what people were saying. He had people from across the world. My mom was in one of the in the video. I didn't realize she had logged into it, and I finished watching it, and I was saying it's great. And then my mom says, "Do you know I was there in the actual special?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Go to some 36-minute one window on top because everything's a Zoom thing, right?" And I'm like, "Wait a second, that's my mom there." So yeah, so she's like she pops up a few times. So
that's so special.
Cool, yeah. She's.
Thanks for the client plug-in, Vineet.
Imagine.
No, but it really is, man. I think so many cool things happening around, and the older people also getting into it. Sorry, I don't mean to be ageist, but it really makes me feel.
Yeah, of course.
I'm cool. All right.
Because you mentioned clients, I just want to ask everyone how has work been through this March too?
I will recuse myself. My boss is here.
No, man. I think it's been that whole blood and joy sort of a story, right? Like. I think nothing came easy this year. Everything had to be a battle. We shot a couple of TVCs, and I don't even know how we got through that. And some of the content integrations and IPL. We had a wonderful IPL and all of that, right? So generally, I think everything has been a struggle. But at the same time, I think the joy was also 3x, 4x, right? To be able to pull off something like that in this sort of a year. But of course, I'll be remiss if I don't mention the kind of price we've all paid, right? Be it on mental wellness, be it on the toll it's taken on family, multiple things.
Yeah, it's become hyper work, right? And Vineet, I know you recused yourself, but it'd be good for you to add in a point.
He's been the star of the year.
But so yes, I'll let you go, then I'll go.
It's been crazy. I think from a content perspective, at least in what we do in our day job. It's moved us 3 or 4 years in the future very quickly, right? Like brands had nothing better to do at some point, and they said, "Hey, let's do content because everything else is not working," right? And that really pushed it along for us. I think what we've all been able to do is, and on the back of some really hard work from the teams that we work with, I'm sure, is make a space for. Ride the wave of digital adoption that this year really brought, right? Which is like a strange silver lining overall. But yeah. For me, like I said, my first couple of phases, I was still like on top of it and being like, woohoo, I have mastered working from home. But past few months have been really a drag. Like you start missing, especially in creative work or idea generation. I'm sure you guys will concur. You start missing just bouncing it off, right? Walking along someone's table and being like, hey, what do you think of this? And now you have to do that on the phone. So that's also been a little taxing in general. I hope we have some kind of office come back. I can't believe I'm saying this. I used to be the last person to be like office jana hai. But I hope some kind of one day back to office or something starts happening soon.
But Varun, how's it been for you? You guys have put some extraordinarily amazing work, especially for clients like Netflix and all that. How has it been for you overall?
I'd say it's been an interesting year because I feel that thankfully we got into the whole work from home a week before lockdown was announced. So we had like a 1 week lead up at max. It was a tough time for some teams who didn't have anything to do for a short bit, like for instance, our production teams, right? You couldn't do shoots. So the post-production guys and all that was fine. The agency teams, thankfully, acclimatized a lot faster to working. But initially, brainstorms were tough to kind of come by. How are we going to do a brainstorm online, right? And then somewhere midway through, I think people kind of got what it was. I think one of those moments for us was, I remember that when we did those, we worked on some of those short films for Netflix. I think that was like, I looked at that task of creating short films while in lockdown and our guys really pulled through. But I feel that our focus as leadership has been primarily people, how are people feeling in their head, right? How are they feeling at home? And because a lot of people live alone, and for them that is one end of the problem, and the other end is people living with family, not used to spending so much time with family. You might not have as much space, etc. All that stuff. So I think we had to manage all of that. But the one thing which I've realized is required more than ever in our business now is I've had to take a step back and say, one second, let's look at operations, right? Let's look at how things are structured, how can we kind of build the entire workflows in place. That's become more and more of what and I started to enjoy that a lot more in many ways than the creative process in the job, because I feel that that's really what the future needs, is that you need those robust, almost like I'm using the word pipeline twice, but it's just that, and to kind of bring in that, because I've heard people use the word framework this year than I've ever heard them use that term. I've heard them use words like, I think automation and what is the other one? Repurposing has come up so often, right? Because what can you repurpose with what you already shot? Because we couldn't shoot stuff. We couldn't create new stuff. So we had to kind of use older stuff. So then went into data management. So these are all things which became part of what content was. And that taught us many things and taught us how to prepare for maybe a future lockdown, hopefully. I mean, we now we have to assume that these things can happen again. Right. So if something happens again, post-productions kind of come to the forefront, right? I mean, we've had a lot of that happen. We've pushed that ahead, figured models, but more than things, it's kind of looking at mental health very seriously, trying to figure out how people can take more days off, people can take gap months, kind of take breaks when they can't handle it anymore, just like kind of stuff like that. And also kind of keep ourselves fresher. Like at some point, I took a break from the podcast for a month because I was like, one second, I need to get my head in order. So it's been a mixture of all these things, but I think we pushed.
Yeah, but you know, my question to both of you as leaders: when did you realize that it was going to be more than a year? And what? Because I'm sure in March, and I can tell this from my personal experience is we were staying in a hotel in a business trip, and suddenly everything's sort of thinned down to a point where it almost felt like you were part of the film Shining, right? There's an empty hotel, nobody's there, right? But even then, I didn't really expect things to, if you had asked me at that point, I would have said like July is like worst case, right? When did you guys, what was that moment for you when you realized it's going to be a long haul?
I thought it'd be first week April, second week April we'll be back is what I initially thought. And then I saw that, I thought we'll be back. I mean, I don't know. I think the assumption was, one second.
It's really optimistic, Varun.
The theory of contact tracing, right? You read it, you assume theory, then reality kicks in. And my assumption also was, one second, as many people would not have come into the country. But my assumptions are obviously way off than they were supposed to be because people didn't follow a bunch of things, and we kind of got the free fall after that. But by the time we hit August, September, I was like, okay, now we're in a cycle, right? Now it's a process. This is how days become cyclical, and you're adding a few things in there, bringing back a few things you shouldn't have. But I think post September, I was like, okay, this is how it is. And even if we do go back to office tomorrow, a lot of these things are going to stay in how I'll function. Like I want to work from home for the foreseeable future, unless I really have to go to an office. So the discussions now are like, okay, can we maybe do a monthly meeting where some of us catch up, right? And stuff like that. So it's coming into that.
No, for me, I was like, this is going to be on day one. When the lockdown started, I was convinced that this would take much longer than what we were hoping it would. Like, I think trajectory was similar to what you said. Once you get a sense of, okay, now this is what my new life looks like, the impact of it reduces a lot. But I was convinced, day one, I was convinced we're in this 18 to 24 months, come what may. My mom was like, nahi, sab ho jayega, theek ho jayega. This is happening, believe the news. And I was like, wait, you see what's going to happen now.
We have bank plates.
We have bank plates. It has, oh my God.
Sonic waves.
I was just taken aback at.
I think that was Sonu Nigam who said Sonic waves will come, and I was like, what is happening?
we bank plates and we did a lockdown for like one day and saying like,
practice.
And there was the feel good hit of the summer, go Corona go. That was also
one day of practice, and this is basically like India's tour of Australia.
Listen, man, like I'm trying to forget that. My whole idea of doing this podcast so that I can forget what happened last week.
It's okay.
On that note, let us go into the next segment of the unprecedented episode. Let's do some awards. Obviously, these are the most prestigious awards in advertising, marketing, and entertainment that we'll be giving out this year. They are to be taken very, very seriously. We have
only the essence flows through the audio. You won't get anything physical ever.
We have obviously taken these categories and these nominations very, very seriously. But presenting the OTY award, that they are the of the year awards, like something of the year. All right. First category is the most average ad of the year. The so-so ad of the year.
I like the category name itself, and I like how Vineet, you're average pretending and making us all feel like this is all very well planned as an episode.
Yes.
So budget issue.
What was average? It's always tough to pick average. You can easily pick best and worst, but average is always the tough one. So let me
average is the ad that you remember for
the averageness of it.
For the averageness of it, right? Like it is the mean. You don't remember it's like, I think the average ad, you would not remember what brand it was.
I kind of felt the Amir Khan PhonePe one for me was average. Like, I think it's just him playing himself again in that same thing. I just thought it could be like it was there. I'm like, okay, fair. Like I love the product. Like PhonePe is one of PhonePe and Google Pay primarily have driven every transaction and still do. But I just thought that was a little.
You know what? I actually thought there was more to that campaign. Like I thought like every time an ad came, now there are going to be like 6-7 episodes of this, and then the same thing kept playing again.
Episodic, right? Yeah.
I was like thinking of it as this Coke campaign that he did many decades back, but.
Budget cut. It was a series, but they had money for the pilot.
Baki aap imagine kar lo. We did it, but it happened. I'm going to make the controversial opinion here and say that the cred ads are really average to me. Right? They felt disruptive because, hey, look, we're making fun of celebrities. But what did it really do apart from that buzz? Right? It's a credit card product, high net worth. You want it. It didn't do the FOMO job for me. It's a great idea, great thought, I'm sure. Mutual funds did the same thing. Sorry, Dream 11 did the same thing, not mutual funds. Dream 11 did the same thing with their ads where Mahi and Bumrah were asked, hey, you don't know about playing cricket, you sit here and...
But I loved the Dream 11 ads. Those ads made me want to download it and sort of play it.
I actually downloaded it. I didn't play. I played once.
But that's a thing, right? Like, see, in this category... And I'm not an insider and credit is not a client, but I would assume that the ads function has to be more than just to create a buzz, right? Like in this category especially, I would assume that it's the DAO and the MAO which really matters. You want people to know what the product is, why they're downloading it. And I really laughed at the Anil Kapoor ad. I thought it was funny. And then from there, it was just downhill for me, right? Like I was like, oh God, I have to like...
They had me at Buppy.
No, they were all fun ads. I mean, the films are damn fun. Each one of them, the films are great, right? But as an ad, it just felt like, cool.
I just feel maybe one or two less could have been better than how many they eventually made. But I was actually quite like those ads. I for me, one of the better campaigns because I felt. I mean, again, it depends on what you want, right? I felt that they just went in for buzz. They just went in for 1 second. Let's push this. People get curious. You had that basic thing in the end. They'll download it, but. From what I could gather, it was primarily buzz. I mean,
especially the way they brought in Baba Sehgal to sort of tweet about it, saying, "Can I audition for the credit?" I thought those are all damn.
Absolutely. I think the culture strategy was great, but for me as a cred user who saw the ads post facto, it just felt like, okay, cool.
It wasn't functional. It didn't tell you what it was worth. Like what you get from it, it didn't get.
Yeah.
What is your average?
No, I think I have the clear winner in this category, which is why I'm saving this for the last. I think I can't remember.
Not average, not bad.
The thing is, I can't remember the brand, which is really the symbol of the averageness of the ad. But there was this ad in which Rahul Dravid came in a questionable orange jacket, which was unzipped. It was like he was riding a bike in the middle of Delhi winter and he was just pulled in to do this ad. And neither was he ready for it, nor was he interested in it. And he wanted to be elsewhere very clearly. Right? He was that bored.
He was Kedi number, whatever, what is that? Like, he was wearing a Kedi wala jumpsuit.
Yeah.
Orange is the new Dravid.
Oh my God.
It was like, yes. I think I went back to the time when I was doing recitation competitions where I was not prepared, but I will just vomit whatever I've learned.
I know this is audio, but do you remember that part in the ad when he's trying to really his hands are like flailing around? They're not like his shoulders are stuck.
The hands are talking to us,
but his hands are talking. Like, take me out of here. He's trying to be subtle about it. I was like, oh my God, felt really bad. Felt bad for him. Like it felt like he was in this really uneasy spot. Like I haven't seen him look this uneasy since this MTV Bakra, which is like years ago. But this is the most uneasy I've seen him look.
Yeah.
If any of our listeners can tell which ad Karthik and Varun are talking about, please tweet at us using really uncomfortable Dravid.
# unprecedented episode.
Unprecedented episode. Yes, use # unprecedented episode and tweet at us if you know which ad Karthik and Varun are talking about, right? Do we know which ad we're talking about? We're not going to give that away, right?
We can talk about it. I remember which ad it is.
No, we'll hold that back and generate social engagement because that's what we're all about now. the next category, I think. No, wait. We did most average ad. Let's do justice to the category because it was a year that did see good advertising happen. Best ads of the year, Karthik, Varun?
Karthik is a good pick. I'm sure I know which one he likes.
No, listen. I think for me, I really loved the Dream11 campaign, and I don't want to be partial to the work that we've done, but I really loved the TVC we made for Gemini Oil, which is Hargar Pandal. But to me, I think the ad that really moved me nationally and internationally was, I forget, this is German company. I'll tell you before the end of the episode. But it was for an adult nutrition product. It was a Christmas ad, where the grandfather sort of was working out on his dumbbells for the most part of the ad. In the end, that he was doing it so that he can lift his granddaughter to place a star on the Christmas tree. I thought that was a stunning ad, and it was so in line with the brand message. I really loved that one.
How about you, Varun?
Internationally, there was this pet food ad which was entirely animated, which felt like a Pixar animation. I think it's Hill's pet food, but it's like I felt like I was watching a Pixar film. Right? There's one with a dog and there's one with a cat. It's just beautiful. Like it's a great story. I don't want to give anything away about it, but it's just generally like it's just relationships and a story and. It's just lovely. I mean, that's something which everyone should watch. Just look for Hill's Pet Food, and that's the one that sticks to me. From the India one, although I did like the Cred one, I think the Unacademy one. I thought it was very smart in just using. You never thought like that. For me, that surprised me, and it surprised me in a good way. Like that's not normally you see a lot of these and like, okay, fair enough. I mean, it's a great story, it's great visually, all that stuff. But sometimes a creator comes out which surprises you and delights you, and this one was that. It was.
I actually loved that ad, and to me, it is actually the most underrated ad of the year for sure. Yeah. I really thought that deserved to be on TV and all over our faces because it is just so cool the way it was written, the way it was conceived.
Great, well done.
Yeah.
How about you, Vineet?
I really liked the Guinness ad that came out on St. Patrick's Day. I think in the middle of the entire pandemic, I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic around March, it felt like everyone wanted to replicate what was outside in their ads, right? All your COVID ads had like empty streets. And I'm like, wait 1 second, that's outside. Why is it in your advertising also? And Guinness just went the other way, right? They took footage from all their old parties, all their old ads, and they really put it together very nicely in a very hopeful message for St. Patrick's Day. And I really loved the timing of it, and I loved what it stood for. And it felt like drinking a Guinness, right? Like closer to home, I just have to say it was really heartwarming to see the Not Another Cadbury ad. I think that was really well done. And I know we did it with Mondelez and Ogilvy, but that was really, really nicely put together. The way it was, the message and everything in the middle. There were a bunch of really cool Diwali ads, all of them telling different and really heartwarming stories, but that's the one that really stood out.
And it seems like empathy is going to be a pretty long-term sort of a hangover we'll have, right, for the next few years.
Yeah. Thankfully.
I think overall, do you think advertising moved more emotive this year, to be more emotive this year than more benefits focused? Maybe is that something that's going to stay?
I think it was a balance of. I think the benefits came in where you could actually get it at home, whereas everywhere else you had to go emotive. And I think emotive was across the board. But I feel that where we're going to be, I think transactional is going to come back in a massive way, right? That's how all these companies are going to survive. So
I feel like what's happening to advertising is a bit like what happened to our cinema history, right? Like if you really look at the genre of films that we made in the last, not probably in this decade, but the previous 20-30 decades, they were all like very similar. And to me, my worry is that we're getting too emotional about advertising, right? That's not the only color in that spectrum, right? You have to be able to make fun of yourself. You got to be able to really go bizarre. And all of these things really add to the whole experience that is advertising. I feel like we're becoming a little too emotional for my comfort. But again, for the world that we live in, it's not really a bad thing.
Let us move to the next category in the OTY Awards. On that note, the best and worst apps of the year. We'll go with Varun this time.
Best and worst apps. What is my worst app? I think the best one which I use this year, I mean, Instagram kept me going this year for me. That like takes the cake. Just kind of lived through that and just kind of kept me. I mean, it was in a interesting way for me. Instagram became a really positive space. You'd come there and you just wanted to see content that would not in any way be negative. And the more I looked into it, I was like, okay, this actually. It's kind of interesting, right? Because you'd go to Twitter to hopefully get whatever is called news, but you have to seep through and be very smart about who you follow. But Instagram was like my go-to from that sense of the word. But saying that just from an innovation standpoint, I'm just trying to think of any app which kind of stood out for me in that sense of the word. I'm actually going to pick up my phone right now and see what is my most used app. And I know Instagram's way up there. Spotify.
Did you use Spotify, of course. I was going to ask you if you use any apps to like manage mental well-being and stuff like that. A lot of people.
So I'm a huge junkie for that. I have all the apps. So I use a workout app called Center, which was started by Chris Hemsworth because I work out 6 to 7 days a week. It's become my lockdown thing, which has happened to me. Is that what used to be 3 to 4 days a week is 6 to 7 days a week now. I do a bit of meditation. I use Center for it sometimes. I use Calm. I've used Headspace. I've used all of them. And because I don't like to just have one option, I flip from one to the other through it. So do a lot of that. I can't do more than 10 minutes meditation though. It's like.
And what about podcasting?
So I listen to podcasts on Spotify, to be honest. I mean, in a weird way, because I was doing it on Pocket Casts for the longest time, but for me, Spotify, although it mixes up music and this one for me, I feel that I started getting recommendations for a bunch of stuff which I started liking. So I would listen to a podcast on venture capital and I would get like 10 recommendations, right? So I just think that algo part of it really made me use Spotify more and more. Just to kind of get into that. So that's kind of stuck with me through this year.
Vineet, what about you?
I got into chess in a very big way earlier this year.
Queen's Gambit effect?
No, even before that actually. I mean, it was more like start of the lockdown, I had a lot of free time on our hands. So a bunch of friends and I started playing poker on an app. And then one day I lost a bit of money and I was like, I need to find a pastime that doesn't involve losing money. And that's when I was like, chess is what I should play. And I kind of fell back into a childhood habit. And that really got me through a lot of the lockdown as well. But overall, I think app of the year has been Ludo King. Full on, right? I think my family has started playing Ludo King every night at 11:30. My mom in Nagpur, my sister in San Francisco, and us here in Bombay are just chilling on Ludo King. It's become a big sensation. So I think the year totally belongs to Ludo King in that sense. Overall, I have started measuring my time on apps a lot more, and I also realized that I spend a lot of time on Instagram. I mean, and you really don't know where the time goes, right? So.
What do you guys clock on screen time on the phone? Not laptop.
8 hours.
Yeah, I'm also
my average.
Yeah, 8-9 hours.
It's terrible. I brought it down to 6 this year, man. I mean, it's not difficult considering I have a 3-year-old at home. But yeah. But for me, I think there are multiple things, right? I think I've really, it's been a journey, but I've come to love Google Pay as an app. And I can see now why it was an app that was built for India and now goes through the world. The sheer dependability of that and even the dependability of Ludo King, right? It's a fantastic app like that.
Yeah.
And Varun, to your point, I loved also the interplay between Insta and Spotify, right? I think
I agree.
It's just beautiful. They just go well together, right? That was great. Yeah. For me, I think from a new app perspective, I really enjoyed Clubhouse for a while. I like the concept of an audio social network where you're not leaving anything else behind. It is just what you're talking about it. But I also didn't sort of like the unaccountability of it. Like you can come and say anything and then you can sort of walk off. And after a point, I just didn't find enough engaging conversations, right?
You make your point on accountability. We had so much content moderation issues for all social networks. Imagine trying to moderate audio. I don't even know how that will work.
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, for a brief while, it was great. I even swapped, when I was running from podcast to Clubhouse for a few days, but it didn't last long because there are not enough conversations that are engaging. Maybe it has to do with the way, it is invite based right now, right? So that was there. I think, I was just thinking, Vineet, to your point, what I would really love is a clean, simple poker app, right? I'm a hardcore Texas Hold'em person. And to me, whether it is Spartan or PokerStars or WSOP, when I open it, it is just so bizarre. It is so much chaos around it. I just want to play poker, right? And in fact, the most difficult thing in all of these poker apps is to play poker. Everything else, we can.
I know what you mean. And the one that we used is called Poker 2, POKERRR2. And it was quite intuitive. Like it had a very nice UI. So that's also like a big pain point for
it's huge. But to me, I wouldn't say that the worst app or anything like that. But I think definitely an app that needs a lot of work is Sony Live. It had one of my best pieces of content this year on it, and I was just tweeting about it a few days back, saying, just rewinding something on Sony Live should be declared an art form. I've tried, man. I've tried doing it on Apple TV. I tried doing it on the app. It is just bizarre. Right? I hope they really fix that pretty soon.
I concur. I think Sony Live has been, watching Champions League matches on Sony Live. You're staying up at 12:30, 1 o'clock at night, and then why is this happening in my life? But absolutely, we will talk to people at Sony Live about this.
My app hack for this year, though, was something which I learned from Rohit, is because I started reading a lot more this year, at least the later half of the year. So I went back, started reading a lot more books than I normally do. And he gave me this hack saying, download the audiobook, listen to it while you're reading it, and you get through books much faster. And it registers in your head as well. Although it's that extra bit of expense, but I was just like, I've gone through books much faster and it retains. And then connect that to an app called Readwise. Readwise basically takes the books from your Kindle and it sends you stuff which people have underlined the most. Right. And so you can run through that. So sometimes you want to go back. I primarily read nonfiction. So for me, it's great because I kind of go back and I forgot this piece that was there and it kind of brings it back. So yeah, I found a lot of reading hacks this year.
That's brilliant. That's like a social annotations kind of a thing. I think Pocket also used to have something like that. But
yeah. I also briefly enjoyed this game called Sky. I hope I remember the name of it. It was declared as one of the winners of the iOS space. It was just beautiful. It was very serene.
Brilliant. On that note, next category. Should we talk about what was the best thing you saw this year? Show, movie, video stuff. I'll go first. My favorite thing was a meme where I saw on it wasn't a meme, it's a news clipping actually. And I think it just summed up the entire year from an Indian perspective. It's this guy doing election coverage in Bihar, and he's taking an interview for a guy who's standing in front of a crowd of like 30-40 people jostling and heartland Hindi is going on. And the guy who's talking to the reporter doesn't have a mask on, right? So this other guy behind just takes his own mask off and puts it on this guy and they continue talking. And to me, that really just summed up my entire year. While I saw a lot of other shows and stuff, that meme was what the entire year was for. But anyway, jokes apart. What did you guys got?
No, I think, since you mentioned memes, I think to me, this is a year of creators, right? And I know, Varun, we just did an episode on creators, which I absolutely loved. I think Ruhi Dosani is one of my heroes of the year. Whether it's Ruhi or Canis say the way he ruled the year, or Yashraj Mukate, with what he has done, throughout. I think this has been a year of creators. Right? All your regular superstars have all been at home just watching Netflix. Well, these guys have set the stage on fire. Right? So that I really love. From a series perspective, I love the quintessential Indianness of Scam 92. What I loved about it is it's not the Mad Men of anything. It's not the Master Chef of anything. It's a Scam 92 of India, right? The quintessentially Indian story, and I think that is we're gonna see a lot of that coming through this year. I also loved, as much as I hated the music experience online, I loved the online film festival experience, right? International, Indian, and all of that. And I think it's called One World or something. I forget the name of the festival. It happened in June on YouTube. And I got to catch Ib Ale U, which is the most extraordinary Indian film I've seen in a very, very long time. Really, really beautiful, slick film. I think it's on in theaters now. I would certainly recommend that you watch it. That for me has been the best film of the year.
I'm going to go parallel opposite from what you said and say my favorite movie of the year was Ala Vaikuntapuramlo. Full mass Telugu movie. Watched it some 20-30 times. I get bored. I feel like it's my movie to watch when I want, I don't want to choose, just watch something, and I forward to the scenes I like. And I think sometimes you go back to stuff which you miss. I missed watching a quintessential Gult movie, which is all good vibes, and just that kind of stuck with me. I mean, that's been my constant through the year. I have tried to convince non-Telugu speaking people in my household to watch it. They have all refused vehemently, so I have to still watch it by myself. Thankfully, I have a few friends who will watch it with me in that sense. But I've actually gone back to non-fiction a lot this year in terms of series, right? Just loved Song Exploder. I mean, from a podcast to a show, I love the podcast as well, but just kind of going to musicians like an REM and they're taking up Losing My Religion and just kind of showing you how that happened. I think it's a great narrative that just the way it's built out. Or on the other end of the spectrum, there were two others. One was the Coach's Playbook, which phenomenal. Just kind of look into different kind of sports coaches and how you can kind of use that as well. And there was I really liked The Last Dance for the story of how it got made. The content was exciting. I was a huge Bulls fan at that point of time. Was a Lakers fan for the longest time. So Phil Jackson and all that stuff kind of adds up for me. But so these were my things for the year. And also on the trashy side of nonfiction, Too Hot to Handle and Fabulous Lives of Bollywood Wives are my picks for the year. Brainless entertainment is required.
The absolute best. Both those shows.
On Last Dance, I don't know, man. I really. And I was watching it when I was in quarantine, right? So I really binged on that one. I really loved it to a certain extent. I love basketball as much as I love any other sport, and I've been a huge Spurs fan. But I've seen the years of Bulls and all of that. But to me, after a point, it was just Michael is sitting on different couches and going through the same episode at different points in time, right? To me,
with enough alcohol on the side.
Yeah, correct. And it was great music. It was very well produced, and it's about time NBA had that sort of a film and all of that. But contrary to that, I really loved The Test, which was similar in narrative, but I thought it was much more intriguing. Even though the games actually happened much closer to you in terms of recent memory, I thought there was a bit of a grippiness in that. Vineet, what about you?
I think this year I also spent watching a lot more non-fiction, and I loved the All or Nothing that they did with Jose Mourinho and Spurs. That was another really cool insight into. I mean, I used to really like Jose for a while, and then I didn't like him anymore. But I still like him. I think he's just great, and it was damn cool to watch him, do that coaches thing, because he's just one of a kind. But what I came to realize, I mean, apart from movies and web series, which my wife and I have started watching as if it's an occupational hazard. Now we just keep watching stuff. But what I realized most was I missed sports on TV the most, right? I think the 3 months from March to June, when there wasn't any live football specifically and other sports happening, I overcompensated for that in a big way in the next 6 months that have come by. Right now, if there's even with daylight saving, if matches are happening at 1:30 at night and next morning is a 9 o'clock meeting, I'm I want to do this and go out. That's definitely happened. I also rediscovered a lot of stuff that's come out in the last few years, but I didn't have the time to watch it. I just missed it somehow, and I ended up watching those this year. There's this really great animated show on Netflix called Big Mouth. That if you've checked out, but Nick Kroll, I'd seen the first season and then I just slept on it, and now I saw that there were 4 seasons out, so I watched the other 3. Really, I just love animated comedies, and they just take it to another level. I think it's one of the best written comedy shows that's out there right now. Jordan Peele writes for it, which is just fantastic, right? Closer to home, I thought there's this movie called Bulbul. I don't know if you guys got a chance to catch it or hear about it. It's like a Bengali folktale from the 1860s retold as like a feminist horror story. Just amazing, really well produced. Reminded me of Tumbad a little bit in how it treats a folk Indian tale. Plus the Bengali in me was like, hey, 1860s Bengal, and someone is showing 1860s Bengal other than Sharat Chandra. So I'm like, chalega, this is good. No more Devdas. Show us more Bulbul. So that was a lot of fun. And I mean, out of the web series, I really enjoyed Patal Lok a lot. I think it just felt like the kind of mainstream Indian stuff we need to do a little bit more. While like on the surface, it looks like just another sort of gangster hinterland sort of a movie. It's a lot deeper than the other stuff we've seen. I mean, Mirzapur is a lot of fun to watch, but you need stuff that's a little more socially critiquing. Gods of Dharmapuri did it last year. Like it's a Telugu web series again. Then that's what I found Patal Lok also to be able to do like a little bit more. I really enjoyed Patal Lok. I think it was a standout web series this year. While people will say Patshala is better, I still think Patshala nahi. Kya naam iska? Panchayat. Sorry.
Oh, Panchayat. I really loved Panchayat. There was something very peaceful about watching Panchayat, which I can't explain. And Vineet, you'll probably know this because you come from that school. But Patal Lok to me, I'm sure Varun will concur, is that while I enjoyed it, it's also not new. Right? It seemed much more new as in terms of a milieu to the Bollywood audience. Well, this sort of thing actually happened about 7-8 years or even 10 years back in Malayalam and Tamil and Telugu as well. Right? So to that, but I what performances, man! I absolutely loved it. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Everyone, most of them actually sort of killed it. Right? And in fact, Varun, I was just thinking when you said non-fiction, one other thing I really enjoyed is also the Netflix version of Samin Nusrat's book, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat.
No, I haven't seen that one.
It's nothing like the book at all, but I thought it was a wonderful experience just to watch the visuals of the whole thing. That was brilliant. Yeah.
When you mentioned that, one of the things I've watched the most, and it's still content, right, is that so I had a masterclass subscription, which I'd kind of gotten because when they got the all access thing in, because I had an earlier course I'd bought from them, they gave the 1 year free. As many times I do, I forget when that auto renews, and it auto renewed. So I was stuck with 2020 with this, right? But the number of courses I've done on that, right? I've done like on the advertising side, Goodby Silverstein teaching you creativity and advertising, right? Then you have, I've done Malcolm Gladwell teaching how to write a book. I've also done like how do you make cocktails with two like world-class bartenders. And that kind of pushed me sometime in July.
Did you take the Aaron Sorkin one?
So the Aaron Sorkin one is what I paid for. So a while back I paid, which is how I got that one extra year free. The Aaron Sorkin one was one I did the Aaron Sorkin one and the Shonda Rhimes one last year. And that's how I got last year, I think. And that's how I got into it. But for me, because of that, I actually did an actual course in July. I did the, in true Scott Galloway fanboy mode, I did the Prof G course where it was 2 weeks. I'm now a certified Prof G strategist, if that's the term. I did a strategy course for 2 weeks. It was great. I mean, also really engaging content. I saw how education could be packaged so differently and so well. Like I was genuinely excited. And the best part is I still have the login access, so I can always go back and look at some of those videos again and stuff like that. So except for the live class, which was at 2 a.m. India time because he was in New York, everything else was awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Sounds insane. It sounds really inspiring to be able to do that much like learning, Varun. So good on that, man.
Okay, it didn't feel like learning. This is the fun part.
I think we got completely rogue on your agenda, Vineet.
No, I will bring us back. I will bring us back with the last category, which is the most bizarre moment of the year.
Oh God.
Go,
Karuna, go.
It's been a bizarre year, right? I'm sorry. But bizarre is just like table stakes for the year. So please pick your moments.
Go Karuna, go was my bizarre moment of the year. It is the resounding anthem of this entire year for me. But yeah,
is it the moment where he gave us the slogan, or was it when he got COVID? Like,
no, I found it really weird because he was singing it to the group of guys, and when there was one Chinese guy, from what it looked like, I don't know, he looked. I think the news did mention he was Chinese, and I don't know if I should believe the news in terms of saying if he was Chinese or what else. That's what the news said. And I just found that to be bizarre that they made one dude stand with them. And they were all shouting, go Corona, go. And this guy initially doesn't say it, but then he feels the peer pressure and he starts saying it. That moment, that clip for me is like sheer like 2020.
There's a blank expression on their face which makes it even more chilling, right? Like, go Corona, go. But like for me, it was, imagine you're in April and, given the year we had, it's very easy to forget where Delhi was in the beginning of the year, right? With the Citizenship Act protests, and what was happening in Shaheen Bagh and the beauty of what was happening in Shaheen Bagh as well, right? From there, of course, everything went to a completely different narrative. It was like, someone switched the channel altogether. Mm-hmm. And suddenly, you go through this month of every country talking about their plans for the lockdown, what they're doing. It become very expert sort of a narrative in news and all of this. In between all of this, the Delhi police found time to go and whitewash all the art and the graffiti that was created around the protest. Right? I was like, I know their priorities are not usually the same as what we expect them to be, but even with that lens, this was like, how diabolical can you be, right? Yeah. So, but having said that, I don't think there is anything taking away from the bizarrest moment of the century, which was the Four Seasons episode, right? Gardening equipment or whatever that place was. That was something.
Have you guys ever watched? Did you guys also watch CNN for those entire few days?
Oh yeah,
I don't think I've ever watched CNN this much in my life.
I watched CNN the most when during the 2008 election, which I thought was, those debates were golden, man. Especially the Democratic primaries where Obama, Hillary, Biden, and everybody was fighting among themselves for the primaries. Yeah. I thought those were some of the best debating moments. But yeah, I did catch it. But I was actually half expecting SNL to start showing in between a CNN news episode when this happened, but sadly it did not.
It was the most insane thing in an otherwise insane presidency already, right?
Correct.
I found an article in the New Yorker that tells the whole story of what went on with Four Seasons Total Landscaping. I will send it to you. I think for me, the bizarrest moment or sequence of things was, the whole Justice for SSR thing and where it went from where it started, right? Yeah. As a sort of unsolicited campaign for a now deceased actor turning into a political movement, resulting in one government doing something that they should not be doing, and then another government responding, and it becoming like a crazy, insane thing. That in the middle of a pandemic, while there is China happening, and while China is happening, they banned all those 59, 60 apps as well, which was another really bizarre thing. So between these two things, I was just like...
And Citizen Arnab showed up.
And Citizen Arnab, my God, watching him get released from jail.
What was that? What was that? He was fist thumping in the air for what? I didn't understand that moment at all. Like, he was...
That was Republic TV's year-ender campaign. That was...
Beautiful. I think that should be the best ad of the year. Justice for SSR for Republic TV. That is best ad.
Correct. Yes.
Just delightfully disgusting politics, but that is where we are. All right. With that, we come to the end of the OTY Awards and march on quickly into the last segment.
Yes, let's do that.
This is the AMA. If it's 2020 and you don't know how an AMA works, maybe you should just go back. But here's what's going to happen. I'm going to read out a few questions that some people have been nice enough to send our way, and we will try and answer them. Right? First question comes from Supriya Sinha. What would be the 3 things that any content creator should always keep in mind when starting a new project in 2020 and beyond?
I don't know, man. I'll love to hear what you guys feel. But to me, I think definitely empathy, which, like we spoke, is going to definitely be something that is expected of brands. The other thing is to stay culturally relevant, and also to be seriously honest, right? I think today's audience, especially in a post-COVID world where everybody has more perspective than we did in 2019 December, right? I think people can smell bullshit from like 10 kilometers, right? And we have very little resistance to that anymore. So I think those will be the 3 for me.
For me, it's been the fact that we realize that we have all the tools we require to create anything online, and you don't necessarily, or something you can actually do at home. So those excuses of execution stopping you from realizing your ideas are gone now, right? Anything you want to create, you can figure a way to kind of create it with the tools you can find online and stuff you can maybe just like, and like not like expensive stuff, like really tiny stuff you can even just buy off on Amazon, right? Like I have a ring light now because I'm like, this is a purchase which I did during the lockdown. It's like, it's amazing, right? And it's not like it's a really tiny buy to do to just have that at home. And I feel that that's really one thing. You don't let execution constrain your ideas being realized. And I think that's really important. And secondly, keep trying stuff out till you try an idea out, get that feedback from people out there, tweak it around and try it again. You're never going to realize. And I feel that one thing I've learned is to kind of put stuff out there, see how people react to it, learn from that, and then put out the next piece. Be consistent, create as much as you can, and volume is a good thing, and is what I'd actually tell anybody to write. Keep trying stuff. Always be in beta testing mode.
I think I just have one thing to add. You guys pretty much covered all of it. I think there's still a lot of scope for originality, right? I think what's happening is with so much short content out there and creators sort of making similar jokes about similar things, it's the smallest thing that can make your content stand out and feel original will really work, right? And I think Saloni Gaur, the comedian who used to do Nazma Api, I mean, her rise from just playing a couple of characters to now having a show on Sony Live is quite a journey, right? And I think that stands the test of time, right? If you can add in a bit of your personality, a bit of your own take, a bit of originality into things, and be consistent and be honest and empathetic, I think those principles don't change whether it's a pandemic year or any other year. Yeah. All right. On to the next question, which is from Himanshu Shah. And I couldn't think of two other people who I would like to ask this question to. So thanks for that, Himanshu. How did agencies go about securing more clients during COVID? Did they have to do anything different, or did they just go about their business and normal and hope that clients come in? Because that's a great strategy.
Varun, Hail Mary was... We did a lot of things differently, right? We realized that I feel that strategy came to the forefront this year in terms of what you're putting out there, because a lot of times you'd go in with, okay, we can execute this. In the initial part, execution was kind of in the background, so you went in with a lot more strat. You went in with a lot more long-term things that you could kind of create. And I think brands, because they had the time in many cases, kind of worked on those. But more than anything else, I think that we were all adapting together. Clients were adapting at the same time and we were. So I feel that relationship has changed, right? And I think the way we work with each other, we've seen each other's homes, we've seen each other's family popping into frame. We've seen all of us in home clothes, if that's the term, right? And I feel that's also kind of changed that equation. So I think agencies have learned to. I think empathy has gone both ways so that the relationships evolved. So agencies have also learned to, the bad way to put it is leverage it. Right? I think they've understood how to kind of work with clients better than maybe we did before, is how I take it, and vice versa. But otherwise, the works had to be focused on what we were going through this year. It couldn't come from being blind to what the world is outside and go about with things as they were. So I feel that having a true tap on culture was more relevant this year than any other year. And as long as you had that tap, everything else was just like adapting to working from home.
Vineet, I think you should go next on this one, because I know you've had the best and the worst when it comes to this.
I think it's been a year where a lot of things that were happening slowly till last year started happening faster. Exactly why, for the exact reason that Varun said, like a lot more time with the clients, a lot more long-term thinking going into things. I think what really stood out was that people were more accepting of change in general and more geared to make a change, right? I think a lot of people know that change is required, but there's a lot of inertia. This helped us tide over that. The most important thing is I think agencies learned to do a lot more with less. That's obviously again down to the people who work at agencies really going above and beyond to solve problems for clients, right? I think first 3 months, everyone was in the same boat, right? The veneer of a client being, at the higher end of the information asymmetry and knowing more about the business kind of dropped completely. For 3 months, everyone was in the same boat. I mean, nobody knows what was going to happen. And I think that changed a lot of equations. But yeah, it's made us a lot more efficient. The whole Delhi-Bombay divide or Delhi-Bangalore divide has fallen. You can do meetings more easily, and that's really helped.
Yeah.
I think we still have to do a little bit more to what Varun was saying in terms of let's make it more employee friendly. I think there's still a little bit more that I'm sure we can do, but GroupM at least has given multiple mental health days off, enforced days off, so that way it's been a good year. Karthik?
No, I completely agree with Varun on the culture part. But to me, if I have to pick one thing, see, I've never really liked this entire Facebook sort of line that says, move fast and break things. Right? I always thought it was a fairly juvenile way of putting it. I think that there's good impatience in what we do. But to me, it has always been about doing it right. And not just have the dick size competition of I did it first sort of a thing, right? From that perspective, I could see that sort of a perspective permeating in the client agency relationship as well, right? Everything was more considered, everything was more measurable, and everything was rationalized, right? Is this going to really matter to me as a product, as a brand in the long term, right? So that kind of a change was really good to see.
All right, moving on to the next question. How should brands be looking at podcasting in 2021? I'm going to mix this up with another AMA question that's about audio and brands. So the first question is from Anirudh Chawla about how brands should look at podcasting. Short answer to that is invest in 3 podcasts, the ones that we host. But longer question around podcasting and brands comes from Amar Singh. The US is $1 billion market in audio. When will brands catch on to this in India? What is the future of audio marketing? What should brands do and how should they invest in the medium? Again, start with these 3 podcasts and then do whatever you like. But yeah, opening this up to Karthik and Varun. What should brands do with podcasting in India? Where do you think this goes in 2021?
I think Varun should go first on this one.
So I am a strong believer in that one of the big parts of the future of the podcast space is going to be subscription-led, not from individual creators, but more from platforms. And the more I'm reading what I feel that a lot of people are going to move towards that model, just kind of because advertising doesn't pay enough right now, right, as a podcaster. And eventually that seems to be paying a lot more. But on the other side, what I feel should kind of happen is that brands should look at this as a multi-channel approach. And I feel they aren't looking that way as well. One is the metrics are totally off, comparing it to video. So look at how long someone spends listening to a podcast, etc. But I feel that if you invest into the podcaster with that mindset rather than the podcast itself, that opens up a very different perspective about every person has their own channels of influence. And I feel if you tap into all of those, you get so much more. And because the one thing which podcast hosts have, which is golden for any brand, is we all have, for lack of a better term, we have credibility because we do put our voice out there. We do stand for something in what we say in the conversations we hold. So, and that's something which a brand can actually connect to, which again, on the flip side, podcasts will be very careful about the brands you associate with. That swings both ways. So that's really, I feel, the future. One is going to be podcasters going multi-channel, brands investing because they get that reach across multiple pieces. But yeah, behind paywalls, not as individuals, but more as picking up properties, like how you would sell to a Netflix. You might just sell it to a Spotify, or you might sell it to a Savan or anybody. And that, I see that's going to be part of the pie for all podcasters.
Sure, Karthik?
I agree in part to what Varun said. I completely believe the subscription-based internet economy will take over, simply because of the mess that we are in with platforms like Facebook at this point, right? To me, from a social networking perspective, I really see a future, which is at least in the foreseeable future, a subscription-based piece. To me, podcasting is a little bit more open source for that. I doubt, given the sheer number of creators out there and how open source the entire platform is, that people, would lock them into like a subscription on a platform or a creator, right? So that to me is still the jury's out there. The other thing is like Varun said, there is credibility. And to me, what goes with credibility is also that podcast hosts are also the culture narrators, in the country, right? In any country for that matter. Of course, I completely am aware of this other point of view, which says that people who can't go to therapy start hosting a podcast. But jokes aside, I think these are the people who are at the forefront of a culture and a subculture, right? And a brand, brand communication coming through them, completely agree with Varun, that has a lot of credibility to it. And we have data to prove this as well, right? Varun, we were talking about this the other day, a brand like Squarespace and many others, they've all pretty much invested most of their marketing monies on podcast as a medium. And they've reaped higher recall than some of the, the investments in video and everything else of similar brands, right? So to me, I think there is definitely a case for brands sort of, embracing this space. I think today, while I certainly don't stand by the kind of numbers going around, I think there definitely are about 25 to 30 million people today listening to a podcast episode at least once a month. And that's just my personal assessment of it. This is entirely personal, this data. And to me, that is pretty much where Facebook was in 2014, 2015. And we know the kind of money that we were investing in Facebook back then, right? So to me, I think it's an entire opportunity that we've not really explored at this point, simply because there are no great case studies yet in the space. Vineet, what do you think?
I think there are two different tracks, right? One is podcast for brands and then podcast for podcasters. I think for brands, like you guys said, the numbers are there, right? 25-30 million is not a small number, and brands should be looking at podcasts as a sort of viable medium in their mix. From a content perspective, I don't think brands have really understood the opportunity yet, and maybe some of us are at fault for that. But how does the brand really get back only into audio, right? And how do we translate that for them in terms of something that's usable? B2B brands, for example, whether in the West or in India, money brands for sure are getting into this space, and I think they'll continue to invest in it. But can we reinterpret this space for FMCG? Can we look at beauty brands? I mean, how do you do makeup on podcasts, right? This is an interesting challenge that has come to us this year as well. So I think there's still a little bit creative flexing that we need to do. Like for a toothbrush or a toothpaste brand, can I create a 2-minute podcast and say, hey, every morning you listen to one episode? So stuff like that is still on the cards. But for a podcaster, and as a podcaster, I think subscription is definitely the more long-term sustainable sort of vision. And I think this might sound strange when I say it, but there are a lot of parallels with porn and what OnlyFans has been able to do, where it's turned this into a subscription service, right? So while your core podcast remains free to do, you, because of your credibility and because of the sort of quote unquote intellectual capital you accrue, you create all of this sort of additional content, and that's what people pay for because they care about your voice, right? Something that Substack has also been able to do for journalists. I think that space will grow a little bit more as more and more people tune in. But I don't think it's ever going to be a space where subscription will outweigh ad money. Any money is good right now, but from podcasting, I think it legitimizes the space a lot more, right? When I remember when creators started making money from YouTube in 2011, 2012, that really started pushing it further. So it needs to happen soon. Podcasters need to make money, and brands need to really understand this space a little bit more, or they're missing a trick. Yeah, that's what I think about podcasting. We'll move to the next question. What are the big changes across media consumption, live events, TV, newspapers, billboards? Has the newspaper died? And a related question is, how should people look at outdoor advertising? Are hoardings and billboards still relevant? These are questions from Tejas S. and Swara Sule.
Karthik, you go first.
No, I of course, I am a fan of long form. And to me, especially at a time when, like you said, Varun, at the beginning of the show, not everything that you consume on Twitter is actually news. I think the case for newspaper and a more considered approach, something that is non-breaking news, right, is very important, right? And to me, newspaper still gives it. And for the life of me, I cannot understand how you can open a PDF of a newspaper layout on WhatsApp and consume e-paper, right? I don't get it, right? Because a newspaper is designed in a certain way because it is printed. And if you want to consume digital news, just go to their website and consume it, right? I just don't get e-paper. Yeah. Outdoor, I certainly feel, definitely it's not news that it's taken a bit of a hit. But to me, I'm still a fan of the contextual nature of it, right? The times when I've gone to the airport in the last couple of months, and even today when I drive through Bombay and look at the sort of outdoors we're creating for Netflix shows, I think there is certainly a role for it. But yeah, I don't know if it in its present form it's going to be sustainable for a very, very long time.
Varun?
I'm actually the opposite on the newspaper front because I haven't read a physical newspaper in years now. I moved totally digital a while back on a couple of fronts. One was books initially. Books have kind of come back a little bit to both a mixture of digitalism. But news for me, I agree. Like e-paper doesn't make sense. Just you go to the website, get their app. Great example of that transformation is the New York Times and just how they've been able to move to a fully. I mean, they make some serious money there now, and I feel it will bring credibility back to news. Is the stuff you would actually pay for, and some of those pieces will kind of come in. But I feel that will also then kind of that divide which you spoke of will come back, right? You get the not so great stuff with which is on television because you're not subscribing to it, but you get the actually quality deep stuff if you pay for it. So I don't know what that will do in the future to news content, but I feel that's coming, and it's anyway happening in the West, in India as well. If somebody had asked me a year ago, would you pay to subscribe to news, I would have said I don't think so, but now I actually would. On the other end of the stick, I think outdoor is interesting as long as they make it a lot more dynamic, and I feel that it's seen innovation, but I feel that look at it as something which is content you can actually project onto digital, or is there something you're doing there which is I think it'll bring back technology into out of home in a very interesting way. I mean, you used to have all those interventions and tech innovations happening on OH, which at some point kind of phased out because people thought they were just gimmicks.
Yeah.
I think some of those will kind of come back and that will kind of rejuvenate that entire space. But news for me is the future is entirely digital, right? But it's not e-papers. It's going to be platform and website led.
Are you guys paying for any of these guys like the Morning Context or the Ken or any of these?
I pay for both of them.
Same. For both of them, I pay for a couple of international ones. I've actually found audio news to be interesting. I found these two apps about a month or ago, one called Curio and the other one called AUM. They actually get news stories from across publications globally, and they have narrated audio versions of those. You can also read them in as well, and you can listen to someone kind of narrating it to you. Very interesting. I'm still not sure if I like it or I don't like it, but I found that to be an interesting innovation. The fact that I could get almost a collation of news in one space. Most times I end up reading it rather than listening to it because I find that slower than what I want to run through it through. But I think there's lots of stuff to happen there in the news space.
Definitely. I think both news and outdoor are evolving media. Outdoor, I honestly don't think outdoor as is works anymore. It's just like messaging media anymore. I don't think it's going to work. You need to club outdoor with something else, either outdoor with social or outdoor with technology, like you said. The Netflix outdoors that Karthik mentioned really work because it generates buzz that other media starts covering, right? So that's interesting.
Exactly.
But yeah, that will change.
But sorry to cut you off there, Vineet, but I love, for example, what a Faye is doing right now. The news itself is a bit of a it's a gray area, right? We call everything news, right? I think what I read in the long form, in the editorial of an Indian Express, and what you really see as a breaking news sort of thing on say the NDTV app, they're not really the same things. Right? Somewhere I think there is a bit of an over clubbing all of this as well.
I agree. 100%. Reporting, right? Telling actual on-ground stories versus getting opinion pieces. I think there's a lot of stuff there.
Since we're on this, let me ask you our last media question. Is TV news dead?
No, not by a long shot.
The way I mean it is,
is it dead in content? It died in content a long time ago. But in actuality, I don't think
so. Take the last vestiges of credibility away? Is everyone just...
I think it's subjective to how. I think that we're looking at this from our bubble. I think for a large part of this country and every country, TV news still is how they get their news. I mean, a lot of people think what they get as a forward on WhatsApp is news, right? So, I mean, that's the reality of the world we live in, and I feel that isn't going away. But at some point, and I'm waiting for that point to come in, and I don't know when that will come in, is that when news channels are held accountable for the content they put out, and I feel that any form of, and I don't know how that will ever happen, but it's important for that to come out, is when they're held accountable consistently, and if that accountability takes advertisers away, that's when I feel that could change for the better, or it's just going to descend into madness, which already is in right now.
Yeah. No, I think the thing is with TV news, the problem is not so much in the methodology of the TV news itself, right? Which has been the same, for the last 5-6 decades. I think the problem is in the measurement and us applying the same logic to TV advertising as we apply to a GEC entertainment channel. And I know it's a very politically charged debate at this point. But to me, I think, like Varun said, the reach of, for example, a state-owned channel like Doordarshan or All India Radio for that matter, and the credibility that you can actually bring in something like that is very, very critical, especially in the kind of times we live in, if used honestly.
All right. I think we're just about at the point where TV completely loses credibility for more and more people. That's completely my take, but I do think that's from my bubble. Is it important? For sure. Is it fixable? Not sure. Moving on though, I think the next question is something that the two of you will enjoy specifically. You have all mentioned the Pivot podcast on the show. What has this term come to mean to each of you?
Vineet, I think you should go first on this one.
To me, what it means is a bit of a shortcoming, right? I think there is a lot of directness in the way that the questions are set up on Pivot. And that comes with being in journalism or academia a little bit. And that just shows where I need to sort of work on as a podcaster. But overall, it's a thoroughly enjoyable show. The word pivot to me has come to mean so many different things, not just the podcast, obviously. But in 2020, the word pivot really has started meaning the chance of hope to me going forward, right? So somehow that's it's become part of how I interpret the word. But the podcast obviously is something that I've learned a fair bit from and hope to continue to learn a fair bit from as well. How about you guys?
So pivot for me, it's a masterclass. I take it from two ends, right? One is a consumer, I get so much valuable information about the entire space from that show, and I was very happy when they made it twice a week. It was actually the podcast I would listen to washing dishes early on in lockdown, and so that's one thing. But on the other end, I also learned so much about how I need to be as a host by listening to it. I mean, you just learn smaller nuances about structure, about how to direct traffic, about how to kind of even speak to a guest. I think I've always have like a bunch of notes in my head, also because they're such parallelly different characters, but they work so well together. So there's so much to learn from that show, right? I just like, and I also like what they represent as individuals. Right. Very polar, different, but not shying away from saying something which is on their mind. Sometimes very smartly saying stuff that's on their mind as well. And because I also caught the live, one of the live recording ones which they did, which was Pivot School, where they had like Dara Kaushal from Uber and Sundar Pichai from Google and stuff like that. It's great to see how those things happen. So I've learned a lot about the craft from both of them. I would have to say my teachers in craft on podcasting have been these two. But the word pivot for me, we used to pivot once every 5 years as people. We went to pivoting every 1 year. Now we pivot every week. That's what 2020 has done to us. And so that's what the word has come to mean. It's the weekend pivot, as I call it.
Yeah. No, man, I completely agree on the chemistry, right? Like, for example, I loved Kara when she was speaking, with Walt, for example, right? For many, many years. To me, what this is brought in is an extraordinary interplay. And what to me, stands out in this particular show is that the spontaneity of it. Like the other day, they did an episode where, they were talking about a CEO and then they called him by the wrong name, right? The CEO of Wondery, who they called by the wrong name. And they didn't go back and sort of edit the episode because, it's going out later this week, etc. They just let it be. And then they, in the next episode, clarified that, hey, sorry, this is something that we screwed up with, right, etc. Right? So I like the absolute spontaneity of it. I like the absolute honesty of the show. There are times when, both Scott and Kara sound extremely vulnerable and fallible, right? It's not about always saying the right thing. They don't remember things like that. And I like the confidence from that. As a podcaster, that's what I take away from that, right? You don't have to know all. That's not what the audience expects of you.
Fantastic. We are at the end of our AMAs, but I'm going to throw in an AMA question brought to you by IVM Podcast. What did you guys think of Pratilipi's takeover of IVM and what that means for podcasting in India?
I'd say it's a very interesting mixture to kind of come together, especially when you look at the podcasting space of where it's going. I mean, you're taking vernacular storytelling and that entire part of it, which is obviously where the future is, right? Across all mediums, vernacular, especially in a market like ours, is the future. And that coming together, what IVM has had is that almost like kind of, I would say they kicked off the entire ecosystem of podcasters in India by just kind of creating that whole space out. So it's great to come together. That also makes it very interesting for creators, for listeners, and I can see where things add up. So looking forward to where all of that kind of going ahead.
Karthik?
Man, this is an interesting question, right? Like, for example, I like to, I feel like I should be a co-founder of IVM simply because I've given them more podcast hosts from the Filter Koffee podcast than any other show. But that heartburn aside, what I mean by that for the uninitiated is that, you guys and Siddharth and all of you were on the Filter Koffee podcast, and then you guys had shows which I love today so much.
So the Filter Koffee Podcast is like an audition process.
Correct. Yeah. It's a trial.
That's what it is.
Yeah. It's a cred ad before your actual podcasting career. But jokes aside, I love the journey that Amit and Kavita and all of us and everybody else who works at IBM sort of took for the last many years, and I think it's a great validation of that. And like Varun said, I think it's a wonderful marriage. It's two companies who have the same worldview, and I'm just waiting for what will come out of this combination. I think we're on to some really greater things. For sure. While on the topic, can I go a little bit rogue? I find it very odd that we've not talked about our favorite pods of the year, the stuff that we've discovered.
No, absolutely. I think while we're on the topic of podcasts, your podcast of the year.
My favorite ones, Pivot has obviously gone ahead. We've all spoken. We're not going to put that into category. For me, the Bill Gates and Rashida Jones podcast, asking the big questions, phenomenal. Like, obviously short series, but like great. In that sense, like I just genuinely liked the way that whole thing was put together. Yeah. I actually found this one podcast which I really liked, which is called Inside Voices, which was a podcast where only podcast hosts were interviewed, and I found that beautifully meta yet engaging, and it's a very sweet podcast, and I really like that show. I also enjoyed a bunch of fiction ones, right? I mean, obviously, there's Bhaskar Bose on one end, which I really liked. And I can see where all of that can kind of go. It's almost an audio movie in that sense, the way Mantra works on it. And I think those would pretty much be mine. I mean, I've listened to way too many this year, but these would be mine. And also came back to all sampling Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, which is by far gold standard of randomness. And I enjoy randomness a lot.
Karthik?
I genuinely enjoy both your shows, to be completely honest.
That goes without saying also.
And besides, I think, I share the same sentiment Varun does with fictional podcasts. I think we just onto something really beautiful there. Bhaskar Bose is one. I listened to a new pod called Dosa King, which is the slightly dark story of the guy who founded Saravana Bhavan. So that's a Spotify original. So I listened to that, and there's a lot of great, and Bhaskar Bose I love for the wonderful way it's produced. Right. To me, I also went back to some of my older loves, but a little more deeper. 99% Invisible was one of them. I just listened to a lot of previous episodes of that. Many other podcasts I loved. Some I didn't love so much. For example, I went into the Michelle Obama podcast with a lot of expectations, but to me, somewhere it just sort of flattened out a little bit. Little underwhelmed by that. But also happy for Chuck's new show, which is The Origin of Things. I like the form factor of it. It's very quick. Sadly, it doesn't work for a dishwashing episode, but works for something else. Yeah. What about you, Vineet?
I actually went completely historical this year almost. I rediscovered, I discovered Revolutions, the one that Mike Duncan does. And then I just ran through like multiple seasons of the show. I think I had this one stretch of about 13 hours where I listened to the Russian Revolution on driving on my way back from Nagpur to Bombay. So that was definitely a highlight of the year. I also went back and revisited the old BBC Cultural Exchange podcast. It used to be this really cool radio show on BBC 4, somewhere around 2012, and some really old tidbits in there that really felt like, oh man, the BBC is why the BBC is the gold standard and was doing podcasting even before podcasts were a thing. On the fiction side, I tuned into a lot of podcasts. I actually listen into every fiction podcast that my wife listens to, and there are some real absolute gems in there. But the one that I want to talk about is the one that she's doing called Apocalyptic, which is this story. It's like a post-apocalyptic dispatches of these two rogue girls who are taking on the empire of quiet people, and the quiet people, what they want you to do is to be quiet and not make any noise. So making noise is like an act of rebellion, and it's like this really well produced kick-ass show that they're doing. So yeah, check that one out as well. But yeah, those were my sort of pods of the year. Very here and there, I listened to a lot of the Manchester United podcast, because that really that's like a sort of religion for me in that way. And I discovered this really cool chess podcast called Perpetual Chess, where you get a peek into the minds of people whose brains are just otherworldly, right? Like chess players, at least, are insane people. And it's great to hear them talk about stuff that's not chess. But yeah, those were my pods that I spent time listening to this year. We are going to go into the last section now. I think that's where we managed to do this with structure. And I know we were aiming for like 90 minutes and might be a little over under. But
not bad. I think we did enough structure in this.
We did a lot of structure, a lot of staying on message.
We are now entering Amit Verma territory, so we should wind up.
Yep. Winding down, I think there's only one thing that can help close a year-ender, and it's prediction time, guys. Karthik, we'll start with you. Your one prediction for a thing that you're sure will happen, and one thing that you hope will not happen.
I think let's do a round of one thing that I'm sure will happen. I think for sure, I think actually a couple of things. One is definitely the big four are going to be split up before the end of the year. Seems like, the kind of what they're up against just seems to defy, all other fair competition norms in many different countries. So that's a reality I think we should all sort of prepare for. Most definitely, I am completely for more films being released on OTT. We had one extraordinary example of that in Tamil, which is Surarai Potru, which is a biopic on Captain Gopinath's entrepreneurial journey. I thought it did really, really well, right? For all the doubts that everybody had. So that's absolutely going to be up there.
How about you, Varun?
I honestly feel that my prediction is that this modular way of functioning, as people, in the way we work, in the way we do everything else, that's going to be here to stay, and it's only going to evolve a lot more. I feel that we'll build experiences, both personal and professional, to suit that. And I think 2020 has been test drive. We're going to get into like proper gear from 21, where we got a lot of these things out. There's something which will definitely stay digital. I feel a lot of live events, not the music kind, but more like, stuff that like product launches, etc., all going to I've seen a lot of success in the way they can be packaged online. I think those are going to stay, but and you're going to have some that will come back to normal, like music concerts, etc., and stuff like that. So I genuinely feel that we're going to go into this modular. I think the analog meeting digital experience, human experience, is going to get pushed up a lot more, and we'll find more nooks and crannies. But I feel 21's also going to bring out a certain level of apathy. This is not me being cynical, I'm just being realistic, saying that there's lots of stuff which you said is going to be the way we will do things. We'll go back to default setting very quickly as vaccine comes in and all that stuff. So towards the end of 21, you're going to see some things go back to, we already are seeing some apathy creep in. So I'm sure that will kind of accelerate, but hopefully we'll have enough guardrails in place. And I think there are enough smart people thinking about those and the and the fact that there are night curfews happening shows that.
What the hell is the night curfew for? I
11 p.m. to 6 a.m. people don't loiter around. If you've been in Bombay New Year's Eve, you'll see the number of people loitering around on the streets at night is massive. So,
and why is that a top 3 problem to solve? I don't understand that. Yeah,
not necessarily, but I'm like, there's something happening. But
is that the prediction that you don't want to come true? Sort of a
thing? Hope it will not happen.
Yeah, too much apathy coming is what I hope will not happen. But practicality tells me that it'll kind of come in, and is what I'm kind of feeling. But yeah, the human experience becoming more digital and analog. It's the reality now. It's only going to get more fine tuned.
Wow, but I think one aspect of that, and which I'm pretty sure is going to happen. I don't think we've seen the best of education in the way that it's happening right now. Right, yeah. I think that will fundamentally have to be reinvented. I'm sure it will happen in 2021. I don't think Indians will take the quality of education they're getting currently, the way it's being delivered digitally. I don't think that's going to cut it. Indian mothers are going to go berserk if their kids have to spend one more year just loitering around in front of...
And fathers.
And fathers, yes, absolutely. And fathers, absolutely. But I think that I'm pretty sure will change, right? We will see either an eat space, meet space coming together better, or better delivery systems in terms of how teachers' apps are designed. And right now, I think we're still in very much 1.0. So I'm pretty sure that 2.0, 3.0 in EdTech is going to happen, and that's definitely a thing. One thing that I hope...
More human contact though in 21. We'll have more human contact.
Definitely. One thing that I hope will not happen next year... What do I hope will not happen next year? I mean, next year is no election year. So otherwise that I would have had like an easy out and said...
There is a lot of elections. There are a lot of state level elections.
There are a lot of state elections. And I hope that doesn't go the way of recent elections in this country. But no,
I'm hoping zombie apocalypse doesn't happen, which every movie which has a vaccine after a pandemic has. So
yeah,
I love someone. I think there was a meme. Someone had said that in all these apocalypse films, they don't really talk about all this sitting and waiting around. Right? But the thing that I really hope doesn't happen, but I'm imminently sure will happen is the whole class aspect of this, right? It's an extension of Varun, what you said about apathy. But this whole hygiene thing can very quickly spiral down into a class thing, and it can become a convenient way for people to sort of say that, right? I think that'll be extremely dangerous. But completely with you on education. I think until you've taken your 3-year-old to a class of 40 and done a craft session, you will not know the pain of a Zoom class. Varun, I'm sure you comply. Yeah.
I comply in many ways.
And from the other side, as someone who just wrapped up a B school course, it's not fun at all. You're not getting anything, right? I can't imagine it being fun for any student, whether you're 3. I mean, I fully empathize with you there. But my God, it needs to change.
It's worse than non-alcoholic beer.
0.0. That's it. I think we're at the end of this year-ender episode, our lazy and fun way of wrapping up the year.
Yet structured. We were structured.
Yes.
Should we let people in on a little secret that we did an unstructured version before?
Yes.
We failed at miserably.
Yes.
And so we came back to do a structured one. The unstructured will lie there.
We should change the name of the episode to the precedented episode.
The director's cut.
And just so that we don't go back into what we did the last time we tried to record this episode, I will say we will call it to a close.
Yes. No, and that's the version that you get if you subscribe to our podcast and pay us some money. We will send you the unprecedented episode before this. But that's it. I think we're at the end of this. Thank you so much for being on your own shows. Cool. So to bring this to a close, parting messages for 2021 and our listeners. Start with Varun.
My parting message for 2021 is I'm hoping 2021 is not weird like 2020. But what my parting message is that just hang in there. I mean, we've been hanging in there, and we'll get through this. And there is a positive to every negative is how I always felt it. And there is positive around the corner as it has been through as this year has wound ahead.
Karthik?
I just have one thing, which is my biggest learning. I know it's a bit cliched, but still is important. Time is all you have.
Beautiful. That's awesome. From me, parting message from 2020 going into 2021. Please don't forget that there is still a pandemic going on outside. Don't forget it. Right?
So true.
It is tempting, but don't forget it. Sanitize, wash your hands, wear a mask, don't go into crowds, and have fun. I think the past 9 months have been practice to figure out how to have fun even when you don't have places to go or things to do. So have more of that fun. With that, we are at the end of this episode. Going to finally bring it to a close. Thank you so much for listening. This is Vineet Kanabar, Varun and Karthik saying goodbye.
See you guys.
Over and out.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. One more reminder, people, please go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and help us out. It will take you a couple of minutes to fill out this survey, but it really is very, very helpful for us. For the people who do fill out the survey and are willing to drop us their email address, we're going to do a special drawing and send out some IVM swag to everybody. So please do help us out with that. But what a week it's been on the network. There's so many things to talk to you all about. Let me run through some of the biggest highlights really, really quickly, right? So Sanjay Jha was on Cyrus Says. What an incredible conversation. I mean, I can't say enough about it. Check that out. We had Hansal Mehta on Marukinaya's Note talking about 1992 scam. Amazing stuff. We had Vishal Gondal talking to Nikhil Advani about his career in film. On StoryTellers and StorySellers, Vineet spoke to Gunjan Arya, the CEO of OML, and Samiksha Unyal from Bacardi about the history of NH7, the Weekender Festival. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav had an amazing episode about the Bushmen of Kalahari. Begin the Journey, Ashish Vidyarthi talks about career choices. On Naan Curry, they talk about cake. What a fun show that was. And on This Round is on Me, we had Dr. Sanjay Arora talking to Gauri about Suburban Diagnostics Company and what he sees as the future of healthcare in India. And for our Tamil speakers, if you haven't been checking out Sivakami and Sabatam, why haven't you? Please do go check that out. Kavita's doing an amazing job telling that story. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Want to learn something new and have a few minutes to spare? Well, then go for the Traveling Professor's Diary, where I, Siddharth Deshmukh, the Traveling Professor, will help you glean from all the insights that I've gained from wherever I've traveled, learned, taught, and repeated. Join me every Tuesday and Thursday on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcasts from.